So you will tell me a few things. Check, check how it's going. So where's my name? All right. Good evening. This is Simon Bevy. We want to welcome you to episode 8. It's already 8 episodes of Sober Sunday. We have had lively conversations here for the last 8 weeks on different topics, all geared towards being able to educate ourselves, create understanding, and build relationships. We're grateful that you're here with us, and we want to invite you and welcome you to host watch parties, talk to your friends, especially the parents, and invite them to this exciting conversation today. Today, we're talking about children at home for 6 more months. The joys, the challenges, and the opportunities that we have as parents and caregivers. And today's focus is on sex education and technology management. I know those are hot topics for parents because of what we are experiencing with our children. So this is a continuation of last week by demand. A lot of people said we did not have enough. We need to continue. And so I invited the same guest that we had last week. And this is part 2 and the last part of this conversation about our children being at home for 6 more months. Again, welcome everyone. Please feel free to let us know where you're listening in from, and feel free to type out your comments and questions. We're going to be able to pick a few as we continue, but very good to be here together. So let me introduce my guest today. Let me start with Terry-Ann Chebet, media personality, parent, and several other things, and businesswoman as well. So welcome. Say hi to all the viewers and listeners.
Thank you, Pastor S, and thank you everybody for joining us again today. I know last week felt, maybe for the speakers, it felt long, but clearly for our viewers, it was, we needed more. We're all parents, and we are always looking for information. What can I do to make sure my children get a better deal in life? So Pastor S, I'm very excited to be here this evening, and thank you so much for inviting me back.
Thank you, Terry-Ann. We're glad to have you. Let me go to Shalom. Shalom, you are a trainer, you're a mentor, you an author as well. You can say hi to us and tell us anything else we need to know about you.
Thanks. It's good to be back. And yes, we had good conversations last week. And I'm looking forward to many more questions. This is going to be almost a radioactive topic because I know sex education and technology is a big deal for parents at the moment. So I'm looking forward to conversations today.
Well, thank you very much. Last but not least, Michael Year is been known as a media practitioner, not personality. He clarified last week. And he's a psychologist, counseling psychologist. He's a mentor. He introduces himself way better than I could. So Mike, go ahead. Mike, you're still muted. So
yeah, thank you very much, Pastor S, and good evening, fellow ladies on the panel with me. Indeed, Pastor S, as you said, counseling psychologist, leadership coach, and media practitioner. So I'm glad to be back. I hope we will be of help.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're glad to have all of you. We're going to jump right into it. Because of time, we want to make sure we cover as much as possible. And we will begin with, I think, the sex education. We have seen in the news how many young girls have gotten pregnant during this season. I think a lot of parents have wondered, so what's happening with my child? We have had lots of, we've seen lots of articles around the increase of pornography viewership. And so lots of parents who are scared about this topic. And whenever we speak about it in our programs like Intentional Dad and Intentional Mom, a lot of parents say, I don't know what to say. I don't know even how to bring up the topic. And I don't know what to do to have a good age-appropriate conversation with my daughter or my son. And part of it is maybe because of the way our parents never talk to us about this topic. For me, I remember how my mom introduced it in a very, I would say a bit of crude way, but she tried because those days, parents never talked about these things. But I remember her just telling me one day I had gotten ready. I took a little longer being a teenager. I was taking a little longer to get myself ready to go to the store. And she was sending me out. And then she said something to me in Kikamba that I wouldn't say. But basically she asked me, you've taken so long to get ready. Are you going for a sex date? And that sounded a little gross, you know, in vernacular. And I didn't know what to say. I giggled about it. But later I realized what she was doing, because the following day I had a conversation with her about it and said, Mom, why did you say that? I mean, I giggled all the way to the store and back. And I was wondering, how could Mom say this? Does she even understand these matters? And in the process, she opened a door and we started a conversation. And so I think we always say that the best way to start this conversation is to make sure there's already a trusted relationship between you and your children to be able to talk about this. But let me ask you, Terry-Ann, should we even bother to talk about this subject to our kids? They already know about it, maybe from social media and other places. So what is our role as parents? What have you done with your own children?
You know, I had a conversation with my daughter before this evening, and I was telling her about today's conversation. And, you know, the first thing she told me, and she's here watching, was that, but Mom, you know that this thing about technology and like we're all in it together. Parents are as much on their phones, as much on their laptops as we are as children. And we had a conversation about what we as parents are doing when we're on our phones. And you know, we had a little laugh about it, but then I'm like, you know, at the end of the day, both of us, you know, are actually at fault. You know, as parents, how much time do we actually spend on our phones, on our laptops when we're at home? Even though we might say, you know, yeah, I'm working from home, it's work, I'm sending an email, but we're still, you know, on our gadgets. So for me, this conversation, you know, starts off from a point of view of, you know, what's my role as a parent in being a role model in as far as technology is concerned? Am I walking the talk? Am I saying you cannot be on your phone for hours on end, yet I'm on my phone for hours on end? And of course, we went into other things, which I'm sure we'll explore later in terms of how do I track her phone? Do I see what she's doing? Do I know who she's talking to? Where does trust, you know, play in the whole space? And these are things I've talked about with her, but I'm sure we'll explore as we go along. But it was interesting to listen to her saying, Mom, this is something that you and I have to both look at.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I know you've gone ahead of us and started on the technology. We wanted to start on the sex education, but we're going to get back to that. Thank you, all of you who have tuned in. Lots of conversations online. Eunice Musine from Uganda, you're saying there was a documentary that was shown recently in your country, the consequences and themes of being pregnant and school dropouts. So this is not only happening in Kenya, it's also happening in other countries. This prolonged season, there seems to be a lot of issues around sexuality. Shalom. Why do you think this is the case? Why are we talking a lot about this? Do you think there's a rise of these incidences, or it's just perceived that they were always there? What's your take on this?
I think sex education has always existed. It's just that,
I mean, the sexual activity, has it gone higher and during this time of COVID?
I don't want to say yes, because I do not have the statistics to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all it has done is gone more public. I'm not sure that it has gone any higher. I think what it has done is gone more public, because now we are able to share information almost in real time, So I'd say sexual activity when we were younger, when we were kids, used to happen, but only the people within your estate or within the neighborhood within which you had sex would get to know about it, It would take a phone call and other things to get that rumor out. But now, even during that activity, there'll be somebody taking a video of it. That's what it's become. Everybody has a means of broadcasting it. So I'm not 100% sure that it has increased, but I know for sure it has become more public. Should we be having the conversation or not? 100% yes, because if we don't, the conversations are already happening. So whether we like it or not, our kids are getting some form of sex education.
So it's already happening. They are getting lots of memes and videos and clips and all of those things around sexuality. So Mike, before we jump into it and talk about the content and how to talk to the children, what do you think is mom's or dad's role in this conversation?
Thank you, Pastor S. First, I think parents have the primary responsibility for sex education, meaning that if anyone is going to be intentionally involving those people who will help communicate in one way or the other, then it is the parents. I don't think parents need to do it alone. Maybe a teacher in school might be good at explaining and educating children, but it has to be the primary responsibility of the parents. There might be an aunt or an uncle who might be an assistant or helping in communicating what needs to be communicated about sex. But these people have to share the values and the principles that are important to the parent who has primary responsibility. I'd also say that in this communication, it needs to be appropriate, age appropriate in terms of the manner it is communicated, and age appropriate in the manner in which the children are empowered to take actions to protect themselves or to avoid situations. And maybe we can talk more about it later.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much for starting us off. I think one of the things we tell parents when we talk about these two subjects is that sex, just like technology, is like fire. It's a good servant, but a bad master. And so children need the guidelines and to understand the boundaries to protect them from the harmful effects of the misuse of both. And so these are two good gifts, and we're starting with sex education, and sex is a good thing. Children need to know that it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it's how you use it and with whom and at what age. That's a conversation we need to have. But every child should understand sexuality is a gift, but it's a gift that God has given us to manage well. Very sexualized society in the media, Terian, adverts and lots of things, with a lot of innuendos about sexuality. It could be, an advert about a drink, and what you see that is not said, but is, is being implied. A lot of movies that kids are watching these days, they seem to be a lot more sexualized. What is a parent to do, and especially a mother, for yourself, to speak for yourself? What is a mother to do in such a sexualized society? Where do you begin? Terry-Ann, all right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Sorry, terribly sorry for that. So I guess I'll start from the beginning in terms of when's a good time to start talking about sexual related issues. And I think, depending on the family, depending on the child, and depending on the circumstances, it could start from whatever time. It could start from when you discover that, maybe your child has been exposed to a story or an issue that is sexual related, and then you must jump in, as a parent. So for me, because I have daughters, this conversation started a lot earlier than I wanted it to start. I was hoping I'd start talking about it when she's like 13 or 14, but we actually started talking about it when she was 9. Because, and it was my fault, because she came across some magazines in my bathroom. I don't know if I can mention them here, but regular girly woman-ish magazines that are pretty, and those things that you keep in your bathroom. Well, I used to keep them in my bathroom, and then I realized one time looking through my iPad that there was a such item that could not possibly be me looking, for that information. And she was 9, and I asked her, what were you searching for? And then we had a long drive, and I said, it's fine, you can be curious about these things. And I thought she picked it up from school. And then, so on the drive, I asked her, so where did you find that information from? Is it somebody at school? Because I was so ready to say bad company, school is not being too, keen on other people's children. It was actually me and my bathroom and the magazines in my bathroom. And that's what had made her curious. So I remember calling home immediately, and I told my nanny, please throw all those magazines that are in my bathroom. I don't want to find them when we're home. So that conversation started at that time. She was 9 years old. In as much as, there's a level at which you can have it, but I think the earlier you start, the better it is. But all keeping in mind what a 9-year-old mind can take, what a 10-year-old mind can take, what a teenage mind can take. So for me, it's been a lot of open conversations. Yesterday, for instance, we were watching a movie at home, and there was a girl who had been kicked out of home because she was a lesbian at 14. And so she asked me about that, and I said, what would you do? Where would you go if I threw you out, at 14? And we had this whole conversation. And of course, being, a Christian and being a mother and trying to be as understanding and as open-minded as possible, it was not an easy conversation to have. But for me, it's always about how open can my child be when they come to me. So I hope, there's a lot of trust involved. There's a lot of no holds barred. And at the end of the day, yes, I want to be a parent and I want her to see me as a parent, but I also want her to have the confidence to approach me with whatever issue that she may have. And yeah, so it's been an interesting journey, and it will continue to be, but it started off rocky. I'm just trying to find my path as we go along.
Yeah. And I understand. I like the points that you brought out, Terry-Ann, that number one, the parents need to be a model, and to make sure that some of the things that would be wrong for the children are not accessible through us. I've talked to many boys who found out about pornography from their father's laptop or phone. And of course, at that point, then it becomes a hard conversation. Because you have to explain why this stuff was on your phone and stuff like that. But what you're saying is that the conversation needs to happen. There needs to be a relationship that you keep creating of understanding and openness. And I like what Sukibe online has said. Sex education must be taught age appropriate, for sure, starting from the private parts as songs for the young ones, even as we go to the teens. if they don't get the information from home, they will get misinformed elsewhere. How well said. It should not be a taboo as it was when we were growing up. And so I think the conversation needs to be open. I think you have said very well, and it's one of the principles we teach: start early. In fact, we start at 3 to 5 when they begin to understand how to talk. And it depends on what you're saying. Of course, at that point, you're trying to tell them what is their private part. This is their private part. It's not to be, played with in public. People shouldn't touch it. Things like those. You're beginning at the level where they are at. Shalom. So we're talking about starting early, building the appropriate relationship for this to happen. What else would you add to the conversation?
I'd say it's to understand that sex education is not just about sex. Because yes, we're talking about sex and sexuality, but I think the question to ask ourselves is what this sex thing is all about. Why are they curious about it? What is sex anyway? What is sexuality? Because if I can focus more on when it comes to teens, and Terian talked about it, about the lesbianism. So what's so wrong about being a lesbian? What's so wrong about being gay? You don't go having conversations or thinking through the holistic thing. And I think that's where now the comprehensive sex education curriculum is beating us, because they have gone to what it is about sex that we need to be talking about. We need to be talking about our values. We need to be talking about our belief systems with our kids. Way before it becomes about sex, we need to be talking about those foundational things. Sex is also about esteem. What would make a girl go and feel she has to go having sex all over the place just to prove a point? What makes a guy go conquering sexually just to prove a point? That's an esteem issue, Boundaries. What causes rape? There are boundaries being violated. There are boundaries that we allow to be violated. So the conversation about sex is not just about sex. It's about everything else that goes around having sex. And I think the thing that makes parents most scared about talking about sex is because they've had sex. So they think that when a kid, or when we say talk about sex, it's about the act, the coitus. And sex is not just about the act, it's about everything else that surrounds it. So I'd say it's to go deeper into the whole sex thing.
Okay. Well said. Thank you very much. I think those of you parents who are listening in and watching, of course, I'm sure you're taking notes. And what you're saying, values are very important. The media and biology in school and other places doesn't teach the values. They only talk about the facts and they don't teach about the values. You're the parent who is most concerned about values. So if there's one thing you're going to give to your children about technology and sexuality, it's going to be the values by which they get to play. Secondly, I think Shalom is saying we need to make sure it's a broader conversation. When children are around 5 to 8, 5 to 10, they begin to relate. They begin to have, to be interested in the opposite sex. They begin to talk about having a crush. They begin to say, I like this person a lot more than the other. That's the time they're growing in friendships and relationships, and they need conversations that are broader than just about the sex. So there's love, there's sex and sexuality, and there's friendship. And we need to have conversations around all of us. Mike, how would you weigh in on this? And from a psychological perspective, in which ways should we be careful not to traumatize our children as we talk about these issues, but make sure that they actually get the right information? And what about if they're already exposed? Like if your son gets to tell you that he got to see a pornography video or something like that, what's the reaction? What do you do?
With your permission, let me start with the trauma and take a different perspective.
Okay.
We approach the things we do, fortunately or unfortunately, as if we need to be perfect. And I think it's safe to say that no parent has done it perfectly since creation. And therefore, inevitably, to one degree or another, depending on the child's resilience, there is some form or shape of trauma that is caused. So I think everyone is growing with a degree of trauma because of something that was done or left undone by a parent in the process of growing. But the good news is that, as I just mentioned, that there is resilience and that there is a place for the relationship to recover or the parent to recover, in part because maybe and hopefully they took more of our better genes, so they're better made, but also because at that present moment, as Shalom said, what we're role modeling gives them a better position or some, what to follow as they go forward.
Yeah.
So I would then say, do not despair. Yet I want to say also that, and allow me, Pastor, that a lot of this requires God's guidance, I think. Why do I say that, even from a psychological point of view? How do we get to know people? How do we get to know even our own child? It's through those insights that we're able to find out, to see, and you have to spend time with them to see them. If the child then comes and tells you that they were exposed to 1, 2, or 3 things, then we go back to what I think Shalom really stressed last week. And that's the fact that some foundational work or in terms of the relationship should have been going on. And in terms of being exposed suddenly to some, to pornography or information about sex, some of it prematurely, or they come across it online, is that hopefully we have taught our children how to evaluate choices and then to make decisions. So they can see, they will be exposed, but we've heard some children react by, they shut it down and move away and go away. They don't indulge further. Or if they come across it, they have the freedom and there's a healthy relationship so that they can come and discuss it. But even more importantly is a decision that they make even when they don't come to you. So are we empowering our children to make good decisions that are in the interest of their well-being, which is founded on the values and principles that we are helping inculcate in them?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let me pick just a few things. A few people have said, Hannah Mwangi is saying, all life on earth is sexual in nature. Humans are part of this most intricate part of God's creation that he determined would procreate through sexuality or sexuality, as some organisms do. So many of you, Sukiba says, my 6-year-old daughter made us comfortable to sing it and learn. Those are the songs of early childhood. Thank you for many of you who are making comments. Nelson Gara is asking, which are these songs that used to be sung around sexuality? But good conversations going on online. I think before we come to you, Terry Ann, I think some of the guidelines, and again, I just want to remind our viewers that we actually do 2 programs for mothers and one for fathers, one for moms. And these 2 topics are key in the conversations that we have, intentional dad and intentional mom. And in case you're interested, we're doing it online right now. It's 7 sessions online, and you're able to access that from wherever you are. Those of you from outside of a country, Kenya, you are able to do that. So just sign up on the page, Transform Nations page. There are some guidelines there, and we will be able to give you information. And some of the things we say, Terry Ann, is that we need to acknowledge you know, that sexuality is a gift, and gender as well is a gift, and that there are gender differences, especially early in life. When the children are young, they need to understand gender differences and why God made them, and why they're important. And then we have already mentioned about the importance and safety of boundaries. I think that is important to bring out. We need to talk about misbehavior around sexuality from an early age, and what is wrong, what is not right, and why it's not. We need to bring in the values, and so begin to talk about sex management and what is acceptable, and begin to talk about sex abuse, because it happens for kids, for them to know how to protect themselves. So Terry-Ann, you were saying that you began the conversation when your daughter was 8, was it?
9.
But 9. But what are some of the challenges you faced as a parent in this conversation as you talk with your children?
Well, some of the biggest challenges is, one, you know, what is age appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the regular question of, you know, what do they know that they're not saying they know? And, you know, how much is too much information?
Mm-hmm.
And at what age, you know, do you say A, do you say B, do you say C? So, and I know that a lot of us, if our parents were anything to go by, you know, relied on school, relied on churches, relied on aunties to, you know, to sort of handle some conversations. And I think there's still space for allowing, you know, us as parents, when the conversations become a little awkward or a little difficult, I think there is space for us to have, you know, I know Shalom last week referred to it as a village around us. There's space for us to have, still have aunties, still have godmothers, still have, you know, other parents or other people around us that can talk to our children when we can't. And that's something that I've also, you know, tried to actively build, because there's some conversations I cannot have, you know, with my child comfortably. And it's gotten to a place where I'm actually comfortable with that. And, you know, there are other aunties that are cooler than I am. There are other, you know, aunties that are more bolder in having certain conversations. And I, you know, I believe and I trust in their thinking. So when there are conversations that I cannot have, and when I'm not sure about is this age appropriate or not, then I hand over. But another issue I'd like to raise, Pastor S, is on you know, digital content as a whole. And because for a long time, you know, we've looked at screen time as an issue. When, for instance, my eldest was, you know, 3-4 years old or 5, or, you know, we had like screen time is between X, you know, when she's done her homework. So 5 to 6, she can watch TV, 6, she has a shower, and then, you know, etc, and then some revision, maybe reads a book before she goes to bed. But a lot has changed in the last couple of years. You know, screen time then was TV, but now there is more applications that they can engage in, they can learn, you know, they can, you know, they can see the world in a completely different picture. My daughter, for instance, now she even watches TED Talks, and it's something that I would, you know, completely encourage. So a lot has changed over time, and how I raised, let's say, my eldest when she was 3, 4, 5 years old is not necessarily how I will raise my youngest, who's 3 now, because there's a lot more learning and there's a lot more engagement within the digital space. The screen time is not the regular screen time that it used to be, you know, a couple of years ago. So I think there's a lot of thinking for us as parents, whether it is, you know, from the sexual side or from just the technology side. There's a lot more that we need to now put into context for us to really say, you know, what do I want my children to experience when they are online?
Okay. Well said. I think we need to understand what's going on around our children, especially technologically, and we will be going to technology, but we also need to know what is age appropriate. Now, one of the things we do in the meeting is to be able to say between this year and this year, 3 and 5, this is what the children need to know. How you say it could be different, could be creative, but this is basically what they need to know. Between 5 and 10, this is what they need to know. You know, we just go through that, and all of that stuff is very available online. We don't need to go to all of those. But one of the things we say, Shalom, and I have done with my children is whenever children ask you a question or you want to have a conversation, also get to know how much they know. For example, one time I was sitting with a neighbor and my little girl came running. And in fact, she has just come into my room right now, came running, and she was like 7 then. And she just shouted and said, Dad, Dad, and I'm with a neighbor, what is oral sex? And I didn't know how to react. Of course, I played cool, and I said, oh, where did you hear that? And she said, I had another boy outside there mention it, and so I ran to ask you what it is. And I said, all right, don't go back to that boy. Stay indoors. We're going to talk afterwards. We're going to have a conversation. And so, of course, after that, I had to explain to my neighbor, that's not our regular conversation in this house. It was, I don't know where that has come from. But then later, I began asking her, so what do you think it is? And then I realized she didn't know much. And then it was easier to begin to explain after I know what she knows and what she doesn't know. And so sometimes it's good to find out. And sometimes they may not tell you what they know. Sometimes they may, and that helps. But be able to freely talk about it and not look shocked about it. Well, Shalom, you talk a lot more to teenagers and about teenagers. At that point, they're already exposed to a lot. And I don't want to scare parents, but I know there's a lot that is happening with teenagers right now. Bare-breasted pictures being shared all over social media, group sex and stuff like that. What would you advise to parents of teenagers?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what I'd call it advice. Understand that your teens know a lot more than they will ever let on. Mm-hmm. Understand that the exposure they have may be enormous in quantity, but it lacks quality and clarity, if I may call it that. And so what this looks like, kids are getting exposed to pornography and assuming that that is what normal male-female sex is all about. So when we are having conversations with teenagers, especially the boys who have watched porn, you know, some, like the younger ones, you know, 12, 13-year-olds will ask a question about sex, you know, and they're, you know, when we're having the sex classes, the sex education classes, and they'll ask a question about sex. And by virtue of hearing what they're asking, I know that they're watching porn. You know, they don't even realize they're watching it. Then they think it's normal sexy type movies or things that they're watching. But when you hear them describe the question, when you hear them talk about certain details, it is pornography that they're watching. And so for the parent, the big thing is to listen. If you listen to the questions they're asking and you listen to the things that they're saying, then you can know how much depth or how much exposure they have. So many of them are watching it and have no clue that it is pornography. Then there are those who are watching pornography and getting so mortified by it. So like conversations that I've had with teenage girls, when they look at how men are having sex with women on the porn whatever sites, they don't want to be, they don't want to get married, you know. So it's as I don't want to get married. I'd rather be a lesbian because being a lesbian keeps me safer. Guys are too rough, so I'll never have sex with a guy. It's safer to have sex with a girl. So the information they're collecting out there is forming belief systems and is cementing some belief systems which are wrong. So we need to look, we shouldn't fear that they're watching porn. We shouldn't fear that they're getting exposed because yes, they will get exposed. What we need to do is figure out what they're getting exposed to and then try to clarify what it actually means. Clarify the risks and the dangers of engaging in porn, even if it's just visually, before it gets the time that you're trying it out. Because what happens now in the teenagehood or teenage level, now they have an opportunity to act it out. They have a chance to practice what it is that they're seeing. When kids of 5, 6 years old watch porn and they try it out, they're still too small and clumsy to even understand what's going on. But teenagers get it better. And so they're more likely to experiment. And therefore, when we have all the statistics coming up of teen girls getting pregnant, is because, yes, to a great extent, they're curious about what it is that they see. But because porn shows the incomplete picture, they go ahead and finish something in real life without quite understanding how it happened behind the scenes. So I'd say for parents, you need to have real conversations. You need to have conversations where you're not just imposing your values, but you're helping transfer the right values. Parents today, teenage parents, are scared of homosexuality. Don't go in sounding homophobic, because the world is telling them what homophobia is. Talk from the values perspective. So it's to say, be confident in what your own beliefs about sexuality are. Then you can be able to give your child clarity on whatever it is that they're listening to or watching or getting exposed to.
That's right. I think very well said. Clarify your values, but also be vulnerable. Before we come to you, Mike, and I know there's a lot you need to say to a lot of parents who feel like, like Nelson here is saying, I think parents are in a dilemma. If they talk about it, they may look like they're introducing sex to the kids. How do you say something is bad, yet the same kid was born out of it? There's a thin line there. And of course, it's just the conversations that keep coming out, because some parents are fearful. If we talk about this, they're going to do it. But if we don't talk about it, they're going to get curious and find about it elsewhere. So just being able to address that. The other day, I had a long conversation with my son, and I always like to remind parents, when you're talking to boys, they talk a lot better shoulder to shoulder. As you're driving together, as you're working together. So we had a long drive and we talked about 10 reasons why pornography is not cool. And I started by acknowledging this is exciting, it's curious. You're a boy, this is what you want to see, a naked body of a woman. It's going to be exciting. And at least we were not looking at each other, so he wasn't feeling shame on himself. And as we continue the conversation, I talked with him about the 10 dangers and how negative effects of pornography. And by the end of it, he was, wow, I don't want to do that anytime. And I know some other kids who have done this, and now I understand the effects. So being able to bring out the effects, the dangers, what the kids are exposing themselves to. And Mike, as I come to you, David Ewagata says, we need to shift our conversations from CSR to CRE. From comprehensive sex education to comprehensive relationship education. The problem with sex is not the act, but the context. Until we agree on this, we will find that these kids, we will keep beating the leaves and root remains intact, as well as demonizing the gift that is sex. Not many avenues teach of an appropriate sexual context, except premarital counseling, which happens after sexual revolution has taken its toll. Well said, David. Thank you for that quote. But Mike, maybe just your input on this conversation.
I feel so many things have been mentioned that I'd like to chime in on. So stop me when it's time to stop. One, based on the discussions that you said you'd had with your children, if I could just give some examples of things that I found myself in. When my son was born, his sisters were older. So without mentioning which sister, she came up to me and said, "How is Davis my brother?" And I suddenly found myself in this situation. Oh, by the way, we were washing the car. So I was ready to deep dive. Like, no. I was about to ask, I was actually about to take her through, do you know what sexual intercourse is? But by God's grace, that's not the direction I went. And I went the direction of what you said and what Shalom said, and I think what Terianne also mentioned. I asked, how do you think Davis is your brother? And based on the explanation she gave, the language she used, comparing how she became my daughter, I was able to explain to her, which kept it age appropriate. And I'd like to say that there are some questions that would help. Any statements made, ask the questions in this form. And Terianne, you might recognize them, but they also work in this context. You know, the how question, or the what question, or the where, when, or the why they think, how they see it, and then hear what they're saying. I found that with the younger children, the way I captured some of the conversations that needed some intervention was by sitting and listening to them play, even if it is in the next room. But you're present and you're listening to the conversation and the discussion they're having. And based on that, I heard what was going on, asked a few questions, and we were able to correct that circumstance. I feel like saying that as parents, we should not fear taking the chance, because really, this is your child. As I said earlier, you're responsible primarily for the child, and you do know the child best, or so we hope, because you've spent time and you're imparting yourself, and you've imparted yourself already, at least genetically. So I'd say take the risk to step out. So is sex bad? I mean, sex in itself is not bad. And I think it would be a failing on our part as parents, and I've seen it in counseling, where we raise our children with the concept that sex is bad. But there's a context, there is an appropriate time, and you know, God knows that I would know about that, that we would want to inform our children about, show our children how it is beautiful. You know, it's the contrast of, if you tell me it's very bad in this way, then I might be tempted to just find out. I mean, are you really telling me the truth? But if you tell me that this is the best way in which it comes, maybe my eyes might open up and I'll say, then maybe that's what I need to wait for. I want to be the person, the child who grows up to be a person who will then enjoy it in this context. Yeah? To talk or not to talk. If you don't talk, be sure someone else is talking with your child, or someone else will talk with your child. But
that's right. This
is where I put it, and I put it just because of what you said, Pastor, and the way you had the discussion with your son. It is work. I mean, the same way we do research to write a proposal, the same way we go to work and we have to go find out the behind story, the backstory, we have to sweat it out to improve what we do professionally. I think we need to sweat it out to improve what we do personally, including parenting and including these conversations about sex education, about online use. And this comes to what you're doing, Pastor S. Parents need to be intentional in, for example, going to find out what are the 10 dangers that I could share with my daughter or son? What are the 10 benefits of a different way that I could share with my daughter or son? We need to learn and educate ourselves so that we're better placed to help our children.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. It's interesting how time just flies. And one of the things I just wanted to put in there and say a few things as we begin to make the shift to technology. And both of them are related, really. But I just wanted to say we need to be authentic with our children. We need to be real. Like, I love to talk to my kids about how I met their mom. And when I had the first girlfriend, and what happened, that I discovered she was my cousin. So we get to be real with them so that they feel like they can be real with us as well. And secondly, we also need to let them know that we're teaching you these things. We know that people fail sometimes, but we want you to know that we love you and we want the best for you. You know, like, you know, a statement I made to my daughter when she got 14 after rites of passage. You know, I had some conversations with her continuing sex education. And one day I told her, now you have your periods, of course you could get pregnant. And you understand that. And I'd love for you to get pregnant in the right context of marriage. But I want you to know, if you made a mistake and you got pregnant and you were still in my house, I want you to know I would still love you the way I love you, and I will work with you. I would be disappointed, but I would love you and walk with you through this. And later she got to tell me that that really meant a lot to her, that I'm not there to judge her. I'm there to give her values and allow her to have a choice, that these are the values I want to live by. But get to know that she's not my daughter just when she does what is right. And of course, we need also to pray for them and trust God it will be okay. Someone has asked online, what are some of the things to talk about besides not having sex before, you know, outside of the right context? What else? And there are many other things. Sexually transmitted infections, you need to talk about that. You need to have conversations around alternative lifestyles in terms of sexuality and what you believe about that. Transgender issues, you need to talk about masturbation, sexting, phone sex. You need to talk about making out, sexual abuse, rape, and sexual harassment. You need to talk about romance in movies and stuff like that, because they're going to see some of those things and wonder why this is PG and dad is watching and mom is not watching. You know, just many things like those. You need to talk about HIV/AIDS. So just different things around sexuality as you talk about love and talk about relationship. But some of the things that we also say besides starting early is give accurate information. You know, once my mom told me that kids are bought in the supermarket, in the store, when I asked her, how do you get babies? And it's better to tell your child, you cannot handle the information right now, I'll tell you when you grow up, but give an explanation to the degree that they can understand. Don't lie to them, because later when they find out that you lied, they feel like you're not reliable to give this information. And so they're going to go and ask other people. So feel free to be able to say, I do not know. And that's okay. During teenage, please explain to them that they're going to have intense attractions with the opposite sex, and those are normal. They're going to have wet dreams, the boys, and that's okay. And explain to them, and all of this information is available online. But more than everything, teach them to have healthy relationships with other boys, if it's a boy, and with girls, if they're boys, so that they can relate well with those of their gender and those of the opposite gender. They can relate well, because then in that, they don't feel the pressure to be able to keep getting to learn more, because they're in good relationship. But when they're lonely, then whenever someone tells them, I like you, then they're willing to do anything for that person. So just creating that holistic picture right there. Terry-Ann, as we begin to go towards technology, and now we'll mix it up. So any of you feel free to contribute to both. I think technology has become a big thing. You talked about the big concern for many parents is the screen time. And I think rightfully so, because if kids spend a lot of time, more than necessary, on the screen, then it's going to make them not do their homework, not enjoy relationships. Of course, there are other effects, especially when they're young. There's hyper multitasking that causes them not to have a good focus, affects their ability to focus and concentrate. So what would you say are the key lessons for your children around technology, and maybe struggles as well, Terry-Ann?
I think key lessons are both for me and the kids, and I'm sure it's the same for for you as well as parents, because for us technology has always been a way of work, either work or if it's at home and it's not now that if we were not working from home, technology would be an engagement where we're trying to catch up with our friends on Facebook, maybe the news online, things on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. But I think we need to draw. We not only need to draw a line, but we need to find the nexus of the educational combination as well, to ensure technology is useful for both ourselves and for children. And sometimes I think as parents we're the biggest culprits. We'll be very quickly telling off our kids for being on their phones, yet we'll be on our phones for even longer. It's the thing of we're all sitting in the sitting room, we're all watching TV or all doing something, but the parent is like constantly on the phone. So I think it's up to all of us to ensure that wherever technology is taking us as a population, as a family, we need to find what is it in this technology that we want our children to engage in. And I'm very keen on what's happening in the technology space in terms of coding, in terms of allowing kids to actually find out all these amazing things that has allowed the US, Japan, and some of these leading economies to have the smartest kids get into the technology space. And I think by getting there is for us as parents to find out what is the educational combination to ensure that our kids are not only online just to play games, but also to find out what is useful and to be able to take, to use that space to learn, not just to learn like in class, but to code and to find all these incredible things that kids in Japan and the US and wherever are working towards, because we're in a global village. And our children in Kenya today will not be just working for Kenya, when they're done. They'll be in a global village. So for us, and my biggest challenge, even as I work with my kids around technology and trying to find the right boundaries, is how can I get them interested in the space of creation and innovativeness, but still within the technology space.
Yeah. I think good points. Thank you. Shalom, as we come to you, I think parents are concerned about the screen time, but they're also concerned about the content access, what kids get to find access to through the telephone. It could be sexual content, it could be violence, it could be suicide, it could be occultic material. Big concern there. What are some of the ways that we could ensure that, especially our teens, technology doesn't become a curse to them?
If you'll allow me, let me say a little about the sex bit and then tied to the question that you've asked about technology. As we are teaching kids about sex and sexuality and all those other details, all the information that they need to know, I think an important aspect is to teach them an escape plan. Give them escape routes. When you tell a teenager that they're going to face peer pressure and you don't give them options of how they can escape it, then you leave them a bit weak, again, depending on the teen. There are those who will be able to take that information and process it and form their own escape plan. But I feel something like you said to your daughter, even if she got pregnant, she can come to you. Even before she gets pregnant, she should be able to know that she can use you as the reason why she will not have sex.
Yeah.
Anything from my dad is gonna kill me to my mom has said no. Let's give them that escape plan. I have known boys who have been given condoms to carry in their pockets, not because they're having sex, but to be able to show other boys and say, I have this. It becomes like the defense mechanism, a sort of defense thing, where they push off the pressure in one way or another. So the different styles will depend on the family. But I'd say as parents, let's give our children an escape plan. Why? Back to technology, when they are also faced with and what is it called? Content that is inappropriate online, they need to have an escape plan. Anything from, okay, our lights have gone off, Wi-Fi has gone down, whatever it is, if they need to find an appropriate escape plan for that point in time, then help them think that through. It's the same as when, let's say a man is getting tempted to go out with some lady out there. He can use his vicious wife as an excuse. Anything to get away from that issue, and then, you can deal with the other details. Yeah. So let's give our children an escape plan. But even as we are teaching them to handle technology, I feel like as parents, we fight the wrong battle. This thing about screen time, I unfortunately disagree with it. I don't think that we should be fighting the battle of screen time. What we should be doing is equipping our kids with what to do when they're on that screen. Because, and I think Terian is going to be competing with kids from Japan who are on screen all the time. So now, how do I direct my child or guide my child to be on the screen for 20 hours, developing a certain code, developing a certain business plan, working on an app that will change or affect the way, have an impact, global impact somewhere. We are not teaching them the discipline of doing the right thing. Like I say, we're getting into this global space where their boss may be somebody who's in a different time zone. If all we do is tell them, get off the phone at 10 o'clock, and maybe they have somebody that they report to who's in a different time zone and they need to be awake at 11 o'clock to get the job done, how do we get them to transition into that space? We are going to render our kids jobless by fighting the technology battle from the wrong side, because the world is leaning towards that way of doing stuff, doing things on tech. So rather than tell your teenager, get off the phone, find out what are they doing on phone and have conversations around what can they do that's more constructive. I've never known a teen who was given constructive stuff, and I don't mean homework. Homework and academics is not necessarily the constructive. That one feels like a chore. If you can find out what your kid is interested in and you leverage your technology to get them researching a lot more about that, they would spend more constructive time online than they would the destructive. But hey, there are things like pop-up windows. So how do you prepare them then to face the things that may get them, what is it called, by mistake? Teach them about free. This thing called free is one of the ones that hackers use to get across to our kids. They shouldn't download free software just like that. Give them practical ways of keeping themselves safe online. If they're not doing like a Zoom call or something like this, their camera doesn't need to be on. They can keep that covered. They don't need to be opening up all the lists to stay safe online, so that you're not just telling them, don't stop, because unfortunately, something I've noticed is that kids today have been denied the phone so much that once they have it, they're looking for the first exciting thing. And unfortunately, because of the sexualized society that we stay in, the first exciting thing will be sexual in nature. Then secondly, we are complaining about content. And this was said at the Fearless Summit, which I hope everyone here attended. But if we are complaining about the wrong content that is online, what are we doing about creating the right content? Because we just can't sit back and say, oh, there's so much pornography. What alternatives are we providing for our teens? Are we putting out content? Are we putting content out there that they can then take and it matters? Are we telling them about taxation? Are we telling them about moving out of home? The things that matter to them, are we having those conversations? Because if we are not, then we are shortchanging them.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Shalom, and thanks for what you're saying. And I know what Terian was probably referring to earlier about screen time is the studies that show that younger minds, if they spend a lot more time on the screen, it actually affects them in terms of their ability to focus. It's interesting, as we come to you, Mike, I was in Germany and I was in this home and I did not see a lot of these Xbox and all of this stuff. And it was a young German couple. And later I asked them, why is it your kids don't play a lot of these games? And what the couple told me is that come with me. And they took me to the basement. There were a lot of Legos and other things for construction. And the kids were spending hours there just creating things and putting things together. And I think science shows that when you kids use their hands a lot more to create things, it helps their minds develop a lot better. And then that German lady told me, you know, when our kids spend a lot of time creating these things, they'll be the next ones to make the new Mercedes Benz. And then the other kids who just play games throughout the day, they'll be their workers. They'll be the ones who will be employed by them. It was interesting. She made a joke of it, but I think she was serious that we need to, as Shalom, as you said, if the kids are on screen, that they're doing something constructive, and that there are alternatives out there that they can do other things so that they don't get hooked and addicted to this. So addiction, technology addiction, Mike, is a big thing. What would you say to that, and what else do you want to say to the conversation?
I'll start with the what else. There are developmental stages for human beings. There are specific ages and times when it's critical that certain things be developed. In infancy, there are important milestones, I think we've heard of them, that should be met. So sometimes we're impressed that, you know, children skip them, but that's not necessarily good. They need to be able to, you know, like manual dexterity, they need to be able to develop that so that that then helps them in the next phase, in the next stage. So when you talk about the family in Germany, I don't know the ages of the children, but they probably understood as parents what is needed most for this developmental stage. And if that is skipped because they're sitting for hours watching and not getting physically active, then we're denying our children the ability to develop. And then creativity comes from a vacuum. I mean, we grew up where you had to create your fun, for example. And I remember a conversation I had to hold with one of my children is to tell them, I'm not your entertainer. I'm not your parents to make sure that you're engaged in this or that or the other. There are times we will just be there. And as we're there, do that which you want that will give you joy and satisfaction and fulfillment. Create it out of whatever. And that, if I caution the parents, can come with some consequences, you know, excessive noise around you or a few things breaking, but they're exercising some creative power. I sense that with regard to time, this might be the last time you let me speak. So can I conclude by taking it back to the foundation where we were last week and just re-emphasizing? I'd like to share 3 out of 3 and then the last 3, if you'll allow me. That parenting is a unique gift and it's precious and it should be treasured. And I connect that gift with a huge responsibility. And therefore, we have an opportunity as parents because our children are ours genetically. And on that basis of being ours, then we can role model and grow them. I also see that no one has done this parenting thing perfectly. And for that reason, then this is a very critical and life-building process. And there are elements that are not transferable from mother and father to aunt and uncle and the like. It's not transferable. Maybe a child can learn living without, but it's not transferable. And how do they learn how to live without? Because of resilience. And you know, they can still grow healthy and thrive irrespective of circumstances not being quite right. So for the most part, I believe that relationships can be restored even when they've been, you know, tested or not been as whole. But parenting does not happen or take place in a vacuum. It happens with both positive and negative influences. And here's where I see that it's important. It's so imperative that we spend the time and that we purposefully teach our children. I mentioned this earlier, dependence and closeness to God, but also teach them how to evaluate their choices and make their decisions. In terms of the technology, as you were mentioning, and on this foundation of parenting, then as Shalom said, as the parent, I need to steer my child toward productive and helpful use of online resources that hopefully brings out and helps, adds to their already existing interests. I'd also see using peers and family and friends and yourself as an influence in directing how this happens. And I think we've extensively spoken about that. I'd say peers, you know, are there peers of theirs who are using technology well and growing out of it? Is there family that you can use to influence in a different way? But most of all, yourself. How are you using it? And not only what they watch, but also tell them, because sometimes they might not know what you're listening to or doing, but bring them into your online world so that they may see and know. And finally, I'd say, and I'd mentioned, do not fear, but in hope, move forward and do help them make better decisions for their future as they use online resources, as they relate with people in their lives. Parenting is a journey of discovery, as much as there are many resources and people who can help us along this path.
All right. Well, there's a lot more that we could say. Let me just tell all the viewers out there before we come to Terian, last words and Shalom, that we have done a few talks on these two subjects, entire long talks of about an hour. And so you could find those on our Facebook page, Transform Nations. And also feel free to sign up for the Intentional Mom program and the Intentional Dad program. We are starting in a few days, in a week or two. And once you sign in, then we'll be able to tell you more details so that you can equip yourself to handle all of this. And thank you for many of you have been walking with us and making good comments there. Many of you saying you've been equipped. Thank you, Daniel Masawi. What you're saying with the reality of kids getting older, younger, due to exposure to media content with adult themes, parents must be media literate and begin early as possible having crucial conversations around this matter. So thank you to many of you who have been engaged with us, and we'll continue with the engagements, but unfortunately time is caught up with us. Terian.
Thank you so much, Pastor S. And you know, after last week's conversation, and I had a watch party on a group called Africa's Leading Ladies, which I shared with you last week, and they were really looking forward. I've just looked at, you know, at the group now where we're still holding a watch party, and many of them were asking about the Intentional Moms program. So I'm glad that you've shared that, and hopefully again at the end, just to clarify on how they can be part of it. It would be really important for us. So as I wind up, and I'll just keep it as brief as possible, technology is not a bad thing. And I really like what the example you've shared about the German family. And for us as Kenyan parents, I feel that technology is usually an excuse to shut the kids up. You know, like, just go watch TV. You know, let me chill and do my thing. Here, have my phone, go play with it and do, you know, just leave me alone. So I think for us, it's incredibly important to create alternatives. And what you said about what they had in their basement, where there's Lego and all these games. And for us, you know, I think sometimes we think we didn't grow the same way our kids have grown up. At least for me, I grew up in Kitale. There was families and families and families. We'd have breakfast in our house, lunch somewhere else, dinner somewhere else, and run home. And those, you know, so many children. But for now, our kids are sort of, you know, locked into these small spaces. So it's up to us to create an experience, even as a family, you know, play games together, whether it's board games or, you know, we could do so much together. So I think there's an opportunity for us as families just to relook at what it is that we do together as families. And that should involve, if it's technology, then also as parents, we see how can we do this together? If it's an app, if it is whatever, how can we be involved? So tech is not just take my phone and go and keep quiet somewhere, but can we engage as a family even within that technology space?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your perspective as well. And just to remind all of us, I think while we get involved in these sometimes parental control things that we need on computers and on our phones, it's not because we don't trust our kids, but because we know they're children. And they can only handle so much at a certain age, but we're working with them, and as they grow older and we instill values in them, and they're able to make choices. I think I've seen parents who have given a smartphone to a 4-year-old, and when they find them on pornography, they wonder why. Well, they just don't know better. And so it's, I think, irresponsible sometimes the way as parents we give away good gadgets without any controls and understanding of the dangers they are posing to the kids, just as a way of getting them off, our business, and not as a way of introducing them to technology, telling them the dangers, the cyberbullying, there's all of these dangers out there, educating them, working with them, so that they'll be responsible around that. Shalom, last words.
Okay, probably in summary, life, not just sex education, technology, including the stuff that we talked about last week. Life is about boundaries. Let's teach our children boundaries. Everything from within the home to that level of sexual boundaries, and then, boundaries with technology. Let's talk about boundaries. Let's talk about their esteem. And I want to look at this from, teenage going up. Again, the conversations vary from 0 to 20. And so I want to focus around how to parent the teenager. Talk about self-esteem. When their bodies are going through all of these hormonal and physical changes, it affects their esteem. And that's one of the things that ends up getting them making the wrong sexual decisions and going about using tech the wrong way. So guide them on their esteem so that then they can be able to manage these other platforms in a healthy way. Let's talk about self-control. If you have taught your child to have anything and everything they want, they will engage without having that element of self-control. And that's where now, if you're able to have self-control conversations, then you're able to have porn and masturbation type conversations. Let's talk about decision-making. How do they make their decisions? Anything from that 3-year-old who decides how they're going to put on their socks and shoes or that smart dress to what they're gonna eat, when they're gonna sleep. Let's teach them decision-making skills. So there are certain skills that are transferable and are not just about sex. So I find that an easy space to get started from, teaching transferable life skills before you dive into this thing that's whole sex that you don't know. But then as a word of encouragement, God always gives us grace. He gives us wisdom when we ask for it, and more so gives us time. And when you're given that, the best thing to do is to start from where you are now. I know there are people listening who are wishing they had started this a lot earlier. I can say for me, the way I parented my older children versus the youngest is totally different, because there are things I had no clue about when I started off my parenting journey that I got to know by the time the last born was born. And so cut yourself some slack, give yourself, extend that grace that you're asking God to give you, extend some of it to yourself, and understand that it doesn't matter where you are from, it is where you're going to that will be the issue. I mean, knowing what you know now, in 3 years' time, if your child is still confused about technology, confused about this sex education thing, then you're responsible for it. You can't say you didn't know. Having watched this and being given permission to go out and, Google has answers, by the way. You just need to look for lots of those videos and search for them appropriately. So what you see today, don't worry about it. It's as a result of decisions that you made before you knew what you knew. But what you're going to see in 3 years' time, I'd say as a form of encouragement, let's work from here on, as opposed to worrying about what we said or did not say. And just be real and practical about it. If you got your kid out of wedlock, be real about it. Don't start covering up. And if you like, for me, one of the things I share very honestly with my children is my sexual life, my spiritual life. When you're honest and authentic, then you let them see that you're human and they can be human too. You give them permission to think about mistakes before they make them, and to forgive themselves for mistakes because they have seen you forgiving yourself for mistakes. Don't try and be a superhuman because of where you are now, because then you're going to create the wrong platform for your child to build their future on. And it's been a joy having these conversations. Yes, thank you for inviting us.
Well, thank you very much. And as we said last week, all of these guests are available. They're all over social media. They all offer different services, coaching for my career and counseling as well. And you could get to find help there. Shalom does a lot of mentoring for girls, and she has written a book that we talked about last week, and it's still available in case you're interested, especially around raising teenagers. Terian, you're in business, you are a consultant currently from home. So feel free, all of you who have been with us and have been very engaged, feel free to reach out to this on their social media pages. Again, just want to say we have different programs that transform nations. Intentional moms, intentional dads, they're all available. And if you go to our pages on Transform Nations or Intentional Mom page or Intentional Dad page, or just let us know on the page where you're watching on Transform Nations Facebook page. There's actually a link to sign up for any of those programs. But just want to conclude by saying, great parenting is not a guarantee that our children will always make the right choices. It only increases and multiplies the chances for them not to forget what we told them. And so we must be engaged. Let's remember to teach them respect of themselves, respect of other people. Let's remember to teach them responsibility, and they're responsible for their body, for their decisions, for their actions, and for making sure that their future is brighter. And let's teach them relationships, to relate freely with us, to relate freely with others, and be able to grow and develop well. And so for today, we're going to end it there. Thank you very much. We're going to have you back in the show at some point. And for all of you, we'll meet next week as we continue with stimulating conversations with me here, Simon Bevy. Thank you and have a good night. And thanks for all your conversations on social media. God bless you.